Alright, as I didn't really cover our small overclocking event over in Espoo in southern Finland, which occurred roughly a month ago. So on the May 21st and 22nd, I thought about covering all of the different results from that event together with you guys. So there was no sense to do this video right after the weekend because we had some leftover LN2 from the event, which we obviously used at home with more time with different components. So there's more sense to cover the results later on like this. So the event featured me, Jokot, so Joel, and Aleksi, who's another member from our Finnish tech media site forum called iotech. Aleksi is more or less like a general PC enthusiast. He has been doing some overclocking with air and water cooling, and he actually has a username on hwbot.org called SomeOldFart. So it was a very great opportunity for Aleksi to try LN2 overclocking for the first time ever, because it's quite rare chance to even try LN2 overclocking in many countries around the world. So anyways, we had been planning for this event for some time with Jokot, but we had to delay it for a few times, for example, due to the Corsair DDR5 overclocking competition, but we actually found a pretty okay spot on the later part of May, right before the summer holidays and so on. So we were provided with LN2 and this space by Aalto University. So huge thanks to Peter and Aalto University for supplying the LN2 and the space for this event. So we had roughly 100 liters of LN2 for this event, or a tiny bit over 100 liters. And yeah, the space was pretty alright. We used the very same space as last time when we had this kind of event in last October, when we went for the RTX 3090 SLI record score. So when we got the global and at the same time the two-way SLI record score in 3D Mark Times by Extreme, the rank 2 score in Pro Royal, and I think we also got the rank 2 score in the normal Times Pi. And actually we still hold the world record score in the Times Pi Extreme with two 3090 graphics cards running at 2520 and 1431 on the memory. And look, there's a score posted by Bizo from South Korea with two 3090 Ti graphics cards with a bit higher clock speeds both on the core and on the memory, but still a tiny bit lower performance in the actual score. So this kind of proves that the 3090 Ti launch in general from Nvidia has been pretty much a failure. So the 3090 Ti has been kind of useless, if you ask me. It's quite weird as the flagship model can barely beat the second best model on the market pretty much. But anyways, so the main focus on my end during this whole event was the non-K overclocking on the Z690 platform. So I got a new BIOS from the EVGA BIOS team right before this event, so I wanted to double check my old 12300 as well as my two G7400 CPUs I had at the time, to double check them before making any kind of judgment on the CPUs. So this is pretty much the setup I ran the whole weekend with. So here you can see the engineering sample version of the Z690 Kimpi motherboard placed on top of the Dimastech Hard version 2.5 bench table. It's a very nice bench table for travel purposes. It has been discontinued for a very long time now, but I still have one, luckily. Galaxy 710 GT graphics card on the bottom PCI Express slot just to display the monitor signal. The latest revision of the T-Rex container by Kimpi Cooling. 2 sticks of G-Skill Trident Z5 6400 Cas32 memory with custom heatsinks by BitsPower. I will cover the heatsinks later on my channel, so stay tuned for that video. And then just the Bart's Honeycomb RAM container for the memory, and actually Seasonic Prime 1300 watt platinum power supply. I actually had some very bad luck when I was about to run these parts for the first time, as I was going to be using the EVGA Supernova 2000 watt G+ power supply. So when I was about to run the parts for the first time, something actually went into short circuit inside the power supply unit. So we actually lost some of the fuses inside the room in one of the buildings over at Aalto University. So I did double check all of the different voltages from the power supply, so the 12 volt, the 5 volt and the 3.3 volt rails, but all of them seemed alright based on the resistance readings. So I think something from the input side inside the power supply unit went into short circuit, so that was very unfortunate, and we actually had to take power, the mains power, from the hallway of the building for the rest of the event. So there's definitely something wrong at the design level with that 2000 watt unit. So I already sent the power supply back to EVGA in Taiwan, and I should be getting the 1600 watt titanium unit as a replacement. And I honestly think that the 1600 watt units, both the platinum and titanium rated units from EVGA, are better than the 2000 watt gold rated unit from EVGA, and at the same time those two should be the best power supply units from EVGA overall. But that's pretty much it. So the space was alright, and I think Jokot actually took some other pictures from the event. So here you can see me filling some of the LN2 containers with liquid nitrogen from this machinery that was attached to the wall. And Jokot actually used the very original T-Rex container from Kimping Cooling, which I actually sold him. So the first revision was never sold on the retail market. So from kimpingcooling.com, it had a pretty bad design. If you ask me, I didn't really like it. It had a very annoying bouncy effect because all of the mass in the earliest or in the first revision was on the outside edges. So there was a huge, like, deep hole at the center, and then 8 outer holes at the same at the edges, and they didn't have any connection with the huge bowl at the center. So the initial pull down speed was very slow in that design, and it had a very annoying bouncy effect when you poured LN2 in, once you have glazed it pretty well with heat gun or blowtorch. So the temperature went down rapidly when you poured LN2 in, and then it immediately bounced back up a few degrees to warmer temperatures. So I didn't really like that design. So I actually gave some tips to Jokot how to improve that design based on my own ideas and findings. So Jokot actually made a tiny connection between the center hole and the outer holes, and he also applied threads to the outer holes. So now the initial pull down speed is pretty quick on this design, and also the full pot temperature performance was pretty awesome. So now the container is actually pretty good. So huge or very nice job, Jokot. But anyways, so let's look at the results now. So I actually managed to improve the clock speed of the 12300 from 6.05 gigahertz to 6.1 plus. So here you can see a nice improvement in Cinebench R20 for a 92 points at 6103 megahertz. So the rank 2 score is by SafeDisk at 6069, and my previous record was done at 6050 roughly. So I wanted to fill the front page leaderboard that was mostly updated at the earlier stages of the Alder Lake launch, but now it hasn't been updated for some time. But anyways, I wanted to run the remaining benchmarks for the leaderboard during the event. So I got a new rank 1 score in Cinebench R15 at 1827, so at 6050 roughly. Then rank 1 score in R11.5. Obviously the R20 at 6.1, which I already showed you guys. This is the part I don't like about in hwbot.org. So they have separate ranking for a few of the Cinebench tests, so 11.5, R15, R20, with and without Benchmade. So here you can see Cinebench R20 with Benchmade is the same score by SafeDisk pretty much, but I could obviously just resubmit my score and get the rank 1 score in this category as well. So this should be removed from hwbot if you ask me. They should integrate the Cinebench and with and without Benchmade together to the same ranking. Cinebench R23 at 12,660. I think it should be at 6,050 once again. So yeah, 6047. Then Geekbench 3 I actually got twice. So the first score was 38,800 and something, and the second run was 39,067. But sadly, Bullshooter found a very nice 12100F CPU, and he actually beat my score by 22 points. So let's look at his result. So he got this score at 6,008 megahertz, but he had very nice memory performance in this test. So 15,042 points on the memory part of the test at around 7,500 megahertz or mega transfers per second at CAS 28 but command rate 2. So this was my weakest part about the test. So I only had 14,171 points, with memory running at like 6,900 megahertz or mega transfers per second, but CAS 27 and command rate 1. So I could obviously take this score down once again if I just reran this whole thing, and I might do that later. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And the remaining scores were the rank 1 score in Geekbench 4 multi-core and Geekbench 5 multi-core, 41,173 and 10,444 points. And then I also ran the rank 1 score in X265 1080p. 4K I still had from my earlier session, which happened in early part of May, and 1080p I ran during the event at, I think, a bit under 6 gigahertz on the CPU. So 5963, cache at around 5.4, and memory at 6827, command rate 1. So that's pretty much it for the 12300. No GPU Pi 1 billion, because that's held by the 5300G, which I have mentioned for a few times now on my channel already. Right after the 12300 tests, I moved on to the G7400 CPUs, but I just couldn't get any more frequency from the CPUs with the newer BIOS. I actually had better end result with the older BIOS, so the BIOS I got on the earlier part of March of this year. So I think it was dated at March 9th of this year. And I just couldn't get any more clock speed from the CPUs. The very same problems continued on both the CPUs, like weird hangs, weird blue screens with where uncorrectable error messages, etc. So I didn't actually run anything on LN2 after the first day. On the second day, we mostly ran parts on the Jokot system. And Aleksi was only there on the first day, so on Saturday he didn't stay overnight, so we were just together with Jokot on Sunday. But let's look at the results which Jokot ran on the event, during the event. So I think Jokot wanted to sort all of the different CPUs he had been acquiring over the last few months and years, so that he could sort like which parts he wants to keep and which parts he wants to sell, because it's pretty, we can't just keep all of the different CPUs we happen to get over time, because components are expensive. We need to constantly sell the CPUs and other parts we don't want to keep. You only need the very best CPU to break the top scores with. So for example, if you speed bin E8600 CPUs, you don't need to keep 400 individual E8600 CPUs. You only need to keep the very best one, which you break the top scores with, So Jokot actually started with a 4770K, but it wasn't very good. So you can see he ran tests at 5.7 and 5.8 gigahertz with that CPU. You need a lot more to break the top scores with on the 4770K CPU. I actually ran 6.4 in Citybench R15 and R11.5 back in the day, and well above 6.5 gigahertz in GPU Pi 1 billion, and around 6.7 gigahertz in hwbot Prime. So Jokot can definitely sell this CPU, or at least I would sell the CPU if I was Jokot. After 4770K, he moved on to 86K, and I think that was the best part about his results from the event. So the 86K went over 6.6 gigahertz, so you can see Citybench R11.5 and R15 at 6.6, GPU Pi 1 billion at 6.6, and Geekbench 3 multi-core and single core at 6.6. Jokot actually had some very annoying operating system issues at the start of the event, and that was the same thing with Aleksi's system as well. So you need to make sure your operating systems are ready to go and they work fully right, I mean, before you actually start to actually run any benchmarks. That's the main thing I have learned throughout the years. So I always have the operating systems in good condition before I even try to run anything on LN2. So those are pretty much the things he ran during the event itself. And I think he ran the 7700K tests at home after the event. So this is actually my old 7700K I sold to Jokot like four years ago or so. So he got the CPU to 6.7 once again. So it shows that the CPU is still in good condition. It went well above 6.7 when I ran that CPU like 4 years ago or 5 years ago or so. So let's actually open some of the tests. So let's open this Sediment R15. So yeah, it has been run in his apartment. So this is not from the same room. So 6.7, and actually Jokot failed in this screenshot. So you need to show the entire CPU part of the CPU-Z program so that we know how many cores and threads are being running during the test. So he got a score of 1487 in Citybench R15. Pretty okay, I guess. And GPU Pi 1 billion at 6750. I think the CPU should be able to do even more. I think I ran GPU Pi 1 billion at 6.8 with this CPU, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I can't really see my own run. Let's see if we open the 7700K leaderboard overall. So GPU Pi 1 billion. I ran 3 minutes 48.9 seconds, so 6840. So yeah, so Jokot should be able to go much higher on the frequency with the 7700K CPU. So 1.84 volts, 6.84 gigahertz on the CPU on the ASRock Z170 MOC formula. And Jokot ran like 90 megahertz lower frequency on the CPU at roughly the same voltage though. So that's pretty much it. And after that, it seems he has rerun the 4770K, maybe to double check the CPU right before selling it. And then 4790K at 6.1. Jokot actually had a very nice 4790K back in the day, but he actually killed the CPU, unfortunately. So I think he has a few more CPUs with that same batch, so he wants to find another one that could be able to do roughly the same clock speeds in various tests as the old one. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. So those are the runs by Jokot, and then lastly was the rig by SomeOldFart, so Aleksi. So Aleksi actually found a very nice 2600K some time ago. So this was posted 2 years ago, roughly. 2600K at 5.3 gigahertz on water cooling with 1.51 volts measured by CPU-Z and 1.42 volts measured by Benchmade on a very bad P67 motherboard. So we thought, or we expected, that the CPU should be very good on LN2, but sadly the CPU didn't scale at all on LN2. So the clock just wouldn't move at all any higher than 5.3 on the multiplier side, and then we tried to move the base clock, but that didn't really help either. So I think the maximum clock speed ended up being 5.35 gigahertz, and we tried a temperature between 0 degrees and minus 50 degrees. No difference whatsoever, but that's quite common with Sandy Bridge CPUs. Most of them can reach the same end result both on air and water cooling and on LN2 or phase change cooling or dry ice. You need to find a CPU that can actually scale a little bit from the colder temperatures. Sometimes some CPUs can scale maybe like 200 megahertz on the clock frequency from the colder temperatures when you run the CPU at like minus 40 or minus 50 degrees Celsius. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It was very awesome. I really like to do the session with Aleksi and Jokot, and I hope we could do more sessions on the future, and would be awesome that we could see some other guys from the community to take part in the session as well, like maybe even Samsa and some other guys as well who have been active in the scene like long time ago, like 10 years ago or so. So yeah, the 12300 was awesome, but yeah, there's definitely more work on the G7400 with the on the Z690 Kimpin. There's some issue with the G7400 on all of the motherboard models from other vendors as well. For some reason, the FLL override doesn't work properly on the G7400. It does work on the 12300, and that's why the 12300 is very smooth to overclock on these various motherboards. The clock doesn't drop at all from when running the CPU on LN2. So if we open this result, we can see that the real clock and the effective clock have been the same on LN2. So 6.1 displayed by CPU Z and the real clock speed under load. This is when everything works all right. And this is where it doesn't really work properly on G7400. So what is happening is the same thing what Haikuki utilized at the early days of Alder Lake launch when he made some clock speed validations. So with G7400, when you overclock the CPU very high on LN2, very high on the base clock, it actually drops the clock speed in secrecy in the background. So you might see even up to 6.5 gigahertz in CPU Z, but the real clock speed, what it is running in the background, might be as low as 5.8 or 5.9, and you can see it by reading the max effective clock in Benchmade. So this is the issue why we have so bad performance with G7400, and I think it happens on most of the motherboard models from other vendors like Tachyon, the model from MSI. I think ASRock has even more issues because there's absolutely no non-K results at all from ASRock this time around on hwbot. So most of the non-K results have been run on the Dark Kimpin, on the Apex, or on the Tachyon motherboard. So if we open up, let's say, Cinebench R15 with G7400, we can see my result. The clock frequency read by CPU Z has been 6.35, 6348 on the max core frequency in Benchmade, but the max effective clock has been at 6.278. So the real clock speed has been like 70 or 80 megahertz lower than what we have been thinking we are running at. So that's why the performance is so bad for this frequency. So it's not really running at 6.35, even though we think it's running at 6.35. If we look at the rank 2 score by Nick from Germany, he ran the test at 629 and the score was 935. So we had pretty much the same result, but I had a tiny bit better efficiency, even though I was running incorrect frequency, or not what I really thought I was running. So here we can see that Nick was actually running pretty flat frequency, so 6289 on CPU Z and 6285 max effective clock measured by Benchmade. So this is something we need to fix, or at least try to fix on the Dark Kimpin to make it better. So I already covered this issue very in depth on my G7400 LN2 video, which I posted on my channel some time ago. But yeah, those are the results. Huge thanks once again to Peter and Aalto University for making this event possible. And I also tested some Core i7 Extreme 975 CPU very extensively on different X58 motherboards. So I will cover that topic later on my channel, so stay tuned for it. I actually lost a lot of LN2 for those attempts with that CPU model, So I actually got the 975 up to 5.75 gigahertz. So it's over here. And I tested all of the different motherboard models. So I tested Rampage 3 Black Edition, Rampage 3 Formula, X58 OC from Gigabyte, as well as the Foxconn Blood Rage. And I can tell you some very extensive information why I don't recommend the Foxconn Blood Rage for LN2 overclocking, at least for any beginner, because it was very hard to control. And you could actually lose your CPU to random voltage values if you run that motherboard on LN2. So it's very risky platform to run any CPU. But it was actually quite strong in the end when I got it working to some degree. So I actually got the CPU up to 5.8 on the blood rage. So yeah, the results were quite very hard to say, but yeah, I actually I just wanted to learn the 975 quite properly with the LN2 I had as leftover from the event. But anyways, thanks for watching these results, and if you like to see this video, then please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Check out my Patreon page as well if you want to support my work, and yeah, thanks for watching one of my videos once again, and I will see you on the next one.